Welcome to the On the Move podcast. My name is Alan Clelland. I am Vice President of the Board of Management of the City of Pasadena's Community Access Corporation, PCAC, and a 24-year resident of the City of Pasadena. PCAC is the parent body of Pasadena Media, which produces this podcast, and which operates the city's two community access television channels, KPAS and the Arroyo channel. I'm pleased to be the host of this, the January 2025 episode of Pasadena Media's monthly On the Move podcast, exploring mobility issues in the city of Pasadena. What we do is to provide information to our community on current issues of interest, present new ideas, and take an occasional look at Pasadena's history and so how we got here. This month's episode takes a look at Pasadena Traffic Court from an interesting angle, that of a retired Los Angeles Superior Court Commissioner and Pasadena area resident of almost 45 years, Mary Lou Byrne. Welcome to the On the Move podcast, Mary Lou.
Thanks, Alan.
And thank you for joining us here. So, could we please start by focusing on you and give us an idea of your background and how you came to be a judge of the traffic court?
All right. Well, I started out as a lawyer, of course. I was a partner in a medium-sized Los Angeles law firm. I did business litigation for 12 years. Then I went to work for the California Court of Appeal for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then I was elected as a commissioner of the Superior Court by the judges of the Superior Court in 2005. And I was on the bench for 18 and a half years until I retired in September 2023.
Okay, so it's a commissioner, but a judge on the court.
Right. So that was always an area of confusion. So there are 600 courtrooms in the Los Angeles Superior Court, but the legislature has only funded 435 or so judgeships. However, by statute, there are court commissioner positions, which are subordinate judicial officers who are essentially hired by the judges to help with the caseload. Commissioners go through the same application process as a judge would go through, wow. But their applications are evaluated by the judges of the court rather than by the voters or by the governor's judicial appointment secretary. So, and then once you're hired, you have the power to hear infraction matters, which is what traffic court is. And then if the parties agree, a commissioner can do anything a judge can do. In my years on the bench, I sat in criminal court, family court, I did unlawful detainers, I did domestic violence, and the parties agreed to have me hear their cases as a matter of course. In practice, I functioned as a judge, and the judges treated me as a colleague.
But when you became a judge, and this has surprised my wife and I when we first came to the U.S., that we were able to elect judges. On what basis, we weren't sure. But, we elect judges. But you were actually selected by judges.
Right.
That was the process.
Right. So some of the judges in the state courts are elected directly by the electorate. Most of them are appointed by the governor. Commissioners, which is what I am, are elected by the judges of the court after having been through an evaluation process. And what happens is every couple of years, there's a committee, they go through the applicants, and they end up with a list of 35 candidates in order. And then every time there's a vacancy, the judges vote. And in practice, they pick the candidates in the order the committee ranked them.
Wow, it sounds like a bigger hurdle than actually getting elected, but we'll not go there. Okay. Well, let's move on from you to interaction with the traffic court. We're starting off right at the basics. Do you have any tips for drivers
officer, well, that precludes you from going into court and credibly testifying as to your speed, right? Because you're going to say, oh, I had my cruise control set at 55, and the officer's going to say, well, he told me he didn't know how fast he was going.
Well, it is a stressful situation,
Right.
I imagine. It's a stressful situation being stopped by the police, so it's better not to say anything, as you say, just remain silent, because it is stressful for you.
Right, and the
Obviously,
officer's writing down everything you say,
Yes.
which you may or may not remember, and which may or may not be consistent with what you want to say in court.
When you get into court.
And when you get into court and you say something that's different from what you told the officer, it's not going to go well for you.
So, what about if you get ticketed?
Well, first thing you need to do, save your ticket. Your ticket has a lot of really important information on it. First of all, when you sign it, you're promising to appear in court. It's got the date and the location and the time of your court appearance. You may well get a courtesy notice in the mail, but don't depend on that. Your ticket is your notice to appear. So keep it, show up in court on that date. Your ticket also has the statute that you were cited for. Look it up. It's all online. So look up the statute that you were cited for. Know what you're being charged with doing, right?
Get educated on that topic,
Absolutely.
basically, yes.
Absolutely. Then if you don't want to mess around with it anymore, you can contact the court, tell them you want to plead no contest and you want to go to traffic school.
Oh.
You'll still have to pay the fine. You'll have to pay for the traffic school, but it will keep you from having a point on your license, and you can get on with your life and hopefully know better and do better in the future.
Okay.
You can only do that once every 18 months, but it's probably the easiest option, if not the cheapest.
Well, there's other issues if it's happening once more,
Right.
18 months, yes, obviously. But what about if you do go to court? What about at court itself?
Okay. If you do go to court, if you really want to play the odds and try to really get out of it, the first court appearance is called the arraignment. That's where the judge is going to tell you what you're charged with, and you're going to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. If you really want to go for it and take your chances, plead not guilty. And then you're going to get another court date. And best case scenario, the officer's not going to show up. If the officer doesn't show up at your trial, then the case is going to be dismissed and you're done. And that happens. That happens maybe half the time.
Really? As frequently
half
as
the
that?
time
Half
or
the
more.
time?
I heard cases from a variety of municipalities. I'm not going to name names, but some of the law enforcement agencies rarely show up to court. Some of the law enforcement agencies always show up to court. But it's not, it's worth, maybe the officer's sick that day.
Oh, yes, that can happen.
Right? You never know.
Yeah.
So if you have the time to come to court a time or two, show up in court and plead not guilty. You can also hire a lawyer who specializes in traffic court. It doesn't cost that much, and they will do that for you. And then
they actually negotiate with the officer or with the judge?
Well, you plead not guilty, you go home, you have your court date, which is going to be 2-3 months out. Mm-hmm. You show up at your trial, that's the time when maybe there's a chance to negotiate. Okay? If the officer does show up, oh darn, the case is not going to be dismissed. Maybe you ask to talk to the officer in the hall. Again, be careful what you say, right? Don't make any admissions, but you can certainly talk to the officer and say, look, do you have any room to change this charge to a violation that wouldn't be a point on my license?
Fascinating.
Do you have any room? Can you and I agree to tell the judge that we've agreed to stipulate that rather than the speed of 80 miles an hour, we're going to agree that the speed was 69 miles an hour, which is going to be a lower fine. So there are things, if the officer doesn't do that and you think you're going to be found guilty, then maybe what you do is you go back into court and you tell the clerk, I've decided to change my plea to no contest and I would like to go to traffic school.
Oh, okay.
Because you always have the chance to change your plea before the trial starts.
So plenty of options for you
Right.
there in that case.
Right. After your trial,
I was going to say, what happens if it goes to trial?
Okay, if it goes to trial, listen carefully. Okay, first of all, you should have researched what you're charged with, right? Let's say you're charged with talking on your cell phone. Okay, there are two elements to that charge. Holding and operating your cell phone, right? So listen to what the officer says. If the officer stands up and says, I was driving down the street on my motorcycle and I saw the defendant driving down the street holding her cell phone and I pulled her over and I wrote her up for this violation, okay? He hasn't proved up the operating part, right?
Actually using it while holding it.
Right. So what do? Do you say, oh, well, I was only using it as a clock. Oh, I was only...
Just checking the time.
Yeah, right? I mean, if you said that to me, I would say, using it as a clock is operating it. Guilty, right?
Okay.
But no, what you say is, Your Honor, I don't want to put on any evidence, but I would argue that the officer has not proved up the second element of this violation, and therefore I ask that the court find me not guilty.
Interesting.
Right. So listen carefully to what the officer says.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, that's an interesting term, proved up.
Right, proved out, that's legal jargon, right?
Yes,
yeah, right.
Prove his case.
Right, he has not
you.
proved his case, right.
Excellent, yeah. And then change and go to traffic school.
Right. Well, right. So after trial, that's a little more iffy, right? I mean, when people get convicted after trial and they ask me if they can go to traffic school, so sometimes before the trial, people would say, Your Honor, if I'm convicted after trial, can I go to traffic school? And I would say, well, I say yes more often than never, but I say no more often than I say yes. If I feel like you had a good faith defense, okay, okay.
Well, changes things. Yeah,
that when you ask for traffic school, then okay, maybe I would do that. But if I think you lied to me, am I going to let you go to traffic school? No, I am not.
No.
If I think you didn't pay attention to what you were charged with, if I think you did some, like I would have people come into my court who had a radar speeding ticket, and they put on a defense about how laser is not reliable. Right? Well, you had a radar. Yeah, you had a radar ticket, dude, and you copied some stuff off the internet about lasers, and you wasted the court's time. And I'm not going to reward you for that by sending you to traffic school.
Goodness me. It's a question of credibility,
Right,
isn't it?
right.
Effectively.
Right.
Yes. Wow, fascinating. Now, we're dealing with the public here, but the public are driving on public roads. Is there any relationship with the Department of Transportation for the city of Pasadena, for example?
Well, I can't...
Between the judges and the...
Right. I can't
city.
speak to the LA Superior Court as an entity. It is my view that as an individual judicial officer, it's inappropriate to me to be too close to the Department of Transportation or the city because that's too close to the police and the prosecuting agencies.
Okay.
As a judicial officer, my job was to adjudicate and to be fair to both sides.
Right.
And so I tried not to be too buddy-buddy with one side or the other.
Now, I was just wondering if the cases come up to do with a particular intersection, for example.
Right.
In this, there are frequent cases to do with a particular intersection.
Right.
Whether that feedback goes back to the
certainly,
department.
For example, let's take the pedestrian in the crosswalk statute, right?
Okay.
Okay, there are certain law enforcement agencies, not including Pasadena, who would, statute says a motorist shall yield to a pedestrian in the crosswalk, right? And there are certain law enforcement agencies who would take the position that the minute the pedestrian steps off the curb, he or she owns the crosswalk, and that the car can't enter the crosswalk. And they would
even if the pedestrian's
right.
way on the other side of this wide crosswalk.
Right, and they would do sting operations. They would have decoy pedestrians stepping off the curb, and then they would ticket people who would enter the crosswalk while the pedestrian was in the crosswalk. So to me, my interpretation of the term "to yield" implies that you have two bodies that would otherwise be on a collision course.
Right.
And there is California case law that agrees with me. And so I hope that I was able to. So how I dealt with that was when the officers were in my courtroom with those cases, I explained the law to them. For example, if the facts of the case were the pedestrian stepped off the curb, say it's 4-lane road.
Yes, that's a good example. A wide road, yes.
Pedestrian steps off the road into the first lane, and let's say it's a stop sign maybe, and motorist goes through, stops the stop sign and then goes through in the farthest lane.
Yeah.
Not interfering with the pedestrian at all, and was ticketed. I would find the defendant not guilty of interfering with the pedestrian because he did not in any way interfere with the pedestrian, and explain to the officer there's a case that says if you're not on a collision course, it's not a violation of the right-of-way. Right. Please go back and tell your agency. And
then the pedestrian is not likely to be in the path of the vehicle.
Right.
It's a wide enough distance, yes,
right.
to guarantee safe passage of the vehicle.
And also, I had an officer once come in and ticketed somebody for turning right behind a pedestrian on the theory that, well, the pedestrian might have changed his mind and gone back. And again, there's a California case, and when I say a case, sometimes cases are appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal will issue a written decision, and that written decision is what we call a case. It's the California case law. Law is both statutes passed by the legislature and then the cases that are written by the Court of Appeal judges interpreting that law. So there's a California case that says, interpreting that statute, a driver is not required to anticipate that a pedestrian might turn around and go the other way.
Well, yes, that's unreasonable. Right. I mean, that would sound unreasonable,
right.
Yes.
Right. And
absolutely.
that's what the law is really, is reasonableness. And finally, the same case says, on the other hand, the pedestrian is required to be safe not only in his body but in his heart.
Yes.
So
yes.
you can't scare him to death.
You can't get really close
yeah.
to them. Yes.
Yeah.
Threaten them. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So in any event, in cases like that, I would never dream of contacting an agency directly, what we call ex parte, out of court, but
right.
certainly in court, I would explain my rulings to the agencies, and hopefully they're not doing those kind of pedestrian sting operations
well,
anymore.
It's a pedestrian sting operation.
Yeah.
Goodness me. Yeah, I would. Just for your information, I'm an instructor with the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons.
Mm-hmm.
Their driver safety course for seniors.
Good for you.
Yeah, and it helps them continue to be a safe driver as they're getting older. And when we get on to the section of the course that deals with the roadways and new signing and everything like that, this always comes up about the pedestrian.
Right.
Yep, and we get four-way stops as well.
Right.
And the message we try and get across is you don't take right-of-way, you give right-of-way.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Although I will tell you, though, that when you clearly legally have the right-of-way, it can be as dangerous not to take your right-of-way as to take somebody else's. Mm-hmm. My grand unified theory of traffic law is that the purpose of the traffic law is to have everybody have the same expectations, right?
Right.
So let's say you come to a four-way stop, and the rule is the first person to come to the stop has the right-of-way, right?
Yes.
And then if we all get there at the same time, the person on the right has the right-of-way.
Exactly.
Right?
That's very clearly laid out in the driver's handbook.
Laid out. And so, therefore, if you do something different than that, now you're creating uncertainty, and then that's when things start to get dicey and dangerous.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's very
clear. So my feeling is, it's you're not being super nice by yielding your right of way when people expect you to take it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Even somebody's yielding it to you and you're not taking it. It's like, okay, this makes the situation more complicated, in fact. the other topic that always comes up right after the topic about pedestrians and crossing the road, four-way stops. What about bicycles? Do they have to stop or not?
Yes, they do.
They do?
Yes, they do. Bicycles, by law, are subject to all the rules of the road that motor vehicles are, except... So the statute says a bicycle is subject to all of the provisions of the vehicle code, except those which by their very nature can have no application. And what that means is there are some laws that apply to vehicles, which a bicycle is.
Yes.
There are some laws that apply to motor vehicles, which a bicycle is not. So, for example, you can't drive a motor vehicle on a sidewalk, but you may drive a bicycle on the sidewalk, but be careful because many municipalities have local ordinances against riding a bicycle on a sidewalk. But under the California Vehicle Code, there's no prohibition of driving a bicycle on a sidewalk. But most important thing is bicycle has to obey all the rules of the road. And that means you have to signal your turns. Right? That means you have to stop at all the stop signs and stoplights.
And traffic lights. They're traffic lights. I don't like calling them stoplights because that was my business when I was in professional in traffic engineering.
Yes.
The go lights.
My goodness. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes.
You have to stop at traffic lights if you're a bicycle.
You absolutely do.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to know. Well, talking about driver behavior and bicycle behavior, you said you'd been in traffic court for 18 years, was that?
Well, I was on the bench for 18 years. The last 10 was in traffic court. I always said I really liked traffic court because, unlike, say, family law, the problems in traffic court are solvable.
Oh, yes, there's a difference in magnitude there, I suppose, difficulty. Did you notice any significant changes in driver behavior during the 10 years that you were in office there?
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
Really?
The pandemic.
Ah, okay.
Things went crazy during the pandemic. There was much less traffic, and the people that were out there lost their minds. And it didn't really get better. For example, there is a particular statute in the California Vehicle Code that prohibits driving over 100 miles an hour and has extra penalties. If you drive over 100 miles an hour, for example, the court can suspend your driver's license for 30 days. It's a much higher fine than regular speeding and so on. So I used to get, pre-pandemic, I would have maybe one of those a month. During and after the pandemic.
100 miles per hour?
Yeah.
What a month?
Yeah, maybe one a month, right, in my court. During and after the pandemic, I was averaging one a day. True story. People just went nuts. People just went nuts. And it's,
less traffic on the road. Yes.
Yeah, less traffic on the road. And it was really funny because it was as likely to be a Honda Civic going 100 miles an hour as like a Lamborghini.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had, the last episode, we had Lieutenant Russo from the traffic police. And he said that much the same thing, that was what the police really noticed. Less traffic on the road so everybody could drive faster.
Yeah.
And it continued to happen even post-pandemic.
Right.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. Do you have any other general comments on the court? Just in the time that we have left here?
Well, when I was first on the bench, I felt like people knew how to behave in court. And, they would come to court and they would be kind of dressed up in their business clothes. And they kind of knew how to behave. And I have a theory about this. And my theory is that 18 years ago, you couldn't turn on the TV without seeing an episode of Law and Order. Remember Law and Order?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they had all those courtroom scenes, right? And so people were used to seeing courtroom scenes. They were used to seing...
That sort of set a standard
for them.
Right,
set a standard, and you call the judge your honor, and you speak when you're spoken to, and you dress up, and you wait your turn to talk, and so on. And since Law and Order went out off the air, people have forgotten how to behave in court, and they've forgotten how to dress in court. And people come to court in their gym clothes, and they literally don't know how to act and don't know what it is and don't know what a trial is. And so over the years, I used to give people a hard time about how they were dressed.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, the Pasadena Traffic Court has a Yelp page. True story. And people leave reviews on the Pasadena Court Yelp page. And somebody left a review saying, the traffic court judge gave me a hard time because I wore my gym clothes to court. And doesn't she know that people have other things they have to do? And, you know...
Taken to task, yes.
Yeah, and you know what? I took that to heart because traffic court is probably the only place that the only court that most people are going to go to. And it's not my job to make people feel bad. And I still advise people to dress up for court. I still advise people to wear business clothes to court. But you meet people where they are. And I'm going to be respectful to you no matter how you're dressed. And so I thank that person who left that Yelp comment for helping me change my attitude. But I still think you should wear your business clothes to court. You should call the judge your honor. You should, don't look at your phone. Speak when you're spoken to. Wait for your turn to talk. All those things, it's only going to help you. Because not every judge is going to be like me. Not every judge is going to be as understanding.
Well, it's not only the lack of law and order on the TV.
Yeah.
I think Zoom calls during the pandemic helped with that as well because people dressed down completely.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I did have one woman one time who, I swear I am not making this up. This woman came in with this blazer on, and it had swear words written all over it. Oh, my goodness me. Oh, my gosh. So the bailiff asked her to take it off, and I thought that was perfect.
Enough is enough, yeah. Well, thank you very, very much, Mary Lou. That was an enjoyable discussion with you. Fascinating. A lot of good information there.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And also, I'd like to thank anybody who's watching this and hope you found that interesting too. And I would encourage you to follow future episodes of the On the Move podcasts. Thank you very, very much. And thank you.